The year is 1348, southwestern France. The noble de Rune family enjoys the final hours of a fragile peace. War with England is drawing near. A young girl, Amicia de Rune, walks through the forest with her father, Robert. They come across a wild boar, and Amicia decides to take it down herself using her sling, a weapon she wields with remarkable skill thanks to years of practice. But the boar survives and flees, and Amicia, along with her dog Leon, gives chase. Venturing deeper into the woods, Amicia discovers the boar's mutilated corpse, something far too gruesome for her dog to have done. Nearby she finds Leon, still alive, but mortally wounded and bleeding heavily. Moments later, an unseen force drags the poor animal beneath the ground into a gaping hole, leaving Amicia and her father horrified. They rush back to their estate. While Robert gathers hunters to track and destroy whatever demonic power killed their dog, Amicia goes to see her mother, Beatrice, who is caring for Amicia's younger brother, Hugo, afflicted by a strange and unknown illness. The boy suffers from violent attacks and weakness. Amicia tries to tell her mother what happened in the forest, but the conversation is interrupted by the sound of galloping hooves. Alarmed, Beatrice orders her daughter to lock herself and Hugo inside the room, no matter what happens. Through the window, Amicia witnesses a horrifying scene. Soldiers of the Inquisition have captured her father. Their leader, Lord Nicholas, demands that Robert surrender his son, Hugo. When Robert refuses, Nicholas executes him in front of Amicia and the household servants, then commands his men to search the estate. The soldiers begin a massacre, killing everyone they find, even the defenseless servants. Amicia and Hugo are soon discovered, but Beatrice intervenes, saving them from the attackers. Together, they try to flee the burning manor. When they reach the outer wall separating the estate from the forest, Nicholas catches up to them. Knowing there's no escape, Beatrice decides to distract him, sacrificing herself so her children can survive. Before closing the door behind her, she orders Amicia to take Hugo to Laurentius, the doctor who had been helping her treat the boy's illness. The door shuts. A heartbeat later, Amicia sees a bloodied sword thrust through the wood. She turns away in shock, and thankfully, Hugo doesn't see it. Somehow, Amicia manages not to fall apart. Grabbing her brother's hand, she runs. Together they dash through the forest, where Nicholas's men are already searching for them. The siblings leap into the river. The current sweeps them away, carrying them far from their pursuers. The river carries them downstream to a village. Amicia has no idea where to find the doctor, so she decides to ask the locals. But there's no one at the gate. Market stalls stand abandoned, their wares rotting where they lay. The village is unnervingly quiet. Those few who glimpse the children quickly hide or shutter their windows. No one answers Amicia's cries for help. White crosses are painted on many doors, a sign that can mean only one thing. The village has been struck by a deadly plague. Smoke rises over the central square. When Amicia and Hugo approach, they see villagers burning people alive, those they believe responsible for spreading the sickness. The moment the mob notices the siblings, they turn their fury on them. Amicia and Hugo flee through the narrow streets, chased by the frenzied townsfolk. Not everyone, however, has lost their humanity. An elderly woman named Clervy opens her door and ushers the frightened children inside. She lets them rest and change into clean, dry clothes. Clervy suggests that the monks at the local church might know where to find Laurentius, the doctor Amicia seeks. Yet she immediately warns Amicia not to go there. No one has seen the monks for some time, and the church itself has become a source of infection. If the siblings enter, Clervy says, they'll find only death. But Hugo, desperate to see his mother, begins to throw a tantrum. He screams, pounds on the table with a hammer, and makes enough noise to draw the villagers' attention. Amicia struggles to calm him, but exhaustion and grief overwhelm her. She snaps, shouting that he'll never see their mother or father again because they're both dead. Horrified by her words, Hugo bolts out the door. Amicia immediately chases after him through the dangerous streets. A villager catches Hugo, forcing Amicia to defend him. In a desperate act of survival, she kills the man with a stone from her sling. Her first kill, though far from her last. The pursuit continues. Hugo runs until he's seized by Conrad, the leader of the maddened villagers. Amicia faces him down, and like a biblical David striking down Goliath, she kills the brute with a well-aimed shot from her sling. At last, the siblings find refuge in the church, the one place the terrified villagers refuse to enter. For now, the holy ground shields them from the raging mob outside. Inside the church, Amicia and Hugo encounter a monk, Father Thomas, whose mind is clearly unraveling. He mutters incoherently, warning them that the church is not safe, that unspeakable horrors have taken place within its walls. Still, out of a flicker of compassion or duty, he agrees to help the children find the farm where Dr. Laurentius lives. To reach it, they must pass through the church catacombs, the only way to avoid the maddened villagers above. As they descend, Father Thomas explains that the townspeople lost their sanity after a terrible sickness swept through the region, a plague brought by the rats. The creatures crept into homes at night, biting people as they slept, spreading death and madness wherever they went. When the monk leads the children to the entrance of the catacombs, a distant rumbling echoes through the tunnels. Then, from the darkness, a massive swarm of rats erupts. The tide of writhing bodies engulfs Father Thomas before he can react. His screams are short-lived. The rats devour him alive as Amicia and Hugo watch in horror. Only the torch in Amicia's hand saves them. The rats recoil from the light, forming a living barrier at the edge of the flickering glow. Step by step, the siblings push through the nightmare, moving carefully between pockets of fire and torchlight. They navigate the infested monastery and the labyrinth of catacombs below, now little more than a monstrous nest, teeming with gnawing, hissing vermin. Against all odds, they emerge at last into the open air beyond the cursed village, gasping for breath under the pale light of day. But just as they escape the deranged villagers and the ravenous swarms of rats, an old threat returns: the Inquisition. Soldiers scour the fields, hunting for them. Amicia and her brother sneak through the patrols, but soon Hugo suffers another seizure. Their mother once managed to ease his attacks with medicine, yet Amicia can do nothing now but carry him as his condition worsens. Eventually, they stumble upon Laurentius's farm, only to find a horrifying sight. The ground is littered with the carcasses of dead animals, their bodies twisted and decayed. Moments later, the earth trembles, and from beneath it, the rats emerge once more. Somehow, Amicia and Hugo manage to reach the doctor's house before the swarm closes in. But the reunion brings no comfort. Dr. Laurentius is gravely ill. The plague has claimed him as well. His young apprentice, Lucas, tends to him as best he can. Before his death, the doctor reveals the truth. The de Rune bloodline is cursed. The corruption does not awaken in every generation, only in one chosen heir, and that heir is Hugo. Laurentius and Beatrice had worked tirelessly to slow the progress of the curse, to keep the macula dormant within the boy. But for reasons unknown, the Inquisition seeks to harness its power. Before Amicia can ask more, the ground shakes violently. The rats are coming again, a thunderous wave of gnashing teeth and squealing bodies. Laurentius, already too weak to flee, orders Lucas to take Amicia and Hugo to a place called Chateau d'Ombrage, a supposed refuge. Moments later, chaos erupts. The laboratory explodes as the swarm tears through the building, and the doctor's house is consumed by fire. Amid the inferno, Lucas teaches Amicia to craft a volatile alchemical compound called ignifer, a mixture that creates bursts of flame to ward off the rats. Using this newfound weapon, the three fight their way through the burning farm, dodging the collapsing structures and endless vermin, until they finally reach a small boat and push off into the river, leaving behind the ruins of Laurentius's home and the nightmare that devoured it. Along the way, Lucas explains the nature of the curse flowing through Hugo's veins. It is an ancient, primal corruption known as the Prima Macula. For generations, it can slumber quietly within the bloodline, leaving no trace of its presence, until a cataclysmic event known as the Great Break awakens it. Each awakening is heralded by an invasion of plague-bearing, man-eating rats. The macula, Lucas says, knows neither good nor evil. It evolves alongside its host, reflecting his emotions, his fears, and his will. Thus, the bearer of the macula holds the power either to halt the spread of the plague and command the swarm, or to plunge the world into nightmarish chaos. Following the river, the group eventually reaches an ancient aqueduct, a path that should lead them to Chateau d'Ombrage. But the journey soon takes a darker turn. Hugo spots a discarded red shield marked with a golden lion, a clear sign that English troops have been nearby. A foul stench rises from ahead, and soon the reason becomes horrifyingly clear. A great battle recently took place here, claiming the lives of thousands of English and French soldiers alike. As far as the eye can see, the road along the aqueduct is carpeted with corpses. To reach their destination, they must cross this hellish battlefield. Predictably, the scent of death has drawn the rats in droves. Among the ruins wander looters and wounded soldiers. When forced to choose, Amicia, hardened by necessity, sacrifices the soldiers to save her brother and Lucas. At one point, English troops capture 2 of the looters, but as Amicia and her companions move through the area, their presence distracts the soldiers just long enough for the bandits to slip away. The escape attempt, however, draws the attention of other guards. In the chaos that follows, Hugo and Amicia are seized by the English soldiers. Under ordinary circumstances, the children would have been executed, and Amicia, most likely, would have suffered something far worse beforehand. But one of the soldiers recognizes the de Rune family crest on her clothing. Hoping for a ransom, they decide to keep the siblings alive. The 2 are locked in separate cages, and even given food while their captors discuss the potential reward. Help, however, comes from the most unexpected place. One of the looters Amicia encountered earlier, a cunning young thief named Melee, sneaks into the camp under cover of darkness. She picks the lock on Amicia's cage and offers her help in freeing Hugo. Together, the 2 girls move stealthily through the camp, evading patrols and searching for Hugo's cage. Meanwhile, Melee's brother, Arthur, creates diversions throughout the camp, setting fires, breaking supplies, and drawing the guards' attention away from the prisoners. Finally, Amicia and Melee reach Hugo and free him. But before they can escape, Lord Nicholas himself arrives at the camp, accompanied by his Inquisition soldiers. Their path to freedom is cut off. Thinking quickly, Arthur launches one last desperate series of distractions: explosions, shouts, collapsing tents, throwing the camp into chaos. Amid the confusion, Amicia, Hugo, and Melee seize their chance and flee into the night, barely escaping with their lives. Soon after their escape, Hugo's condition worsens. His seizures grow more violent, and dark veins begin to spread beneath his skin, pulsing like living shadows. Melee leads the siblings to a thieves' hideout, an abandoned ruin tucked away from the eyes of both soldiers and Plage. There, she finally explains why she and Arthur risk their necks to rescue them. Lucas, she admits, told them that Amicia and Hugo were of noble blood, and that saving them would earn the thieves a handsome reward. When Amicia confesses that this promise of riches was only half true, Melee merely shrugs. Gold or no gold, she has seen enough of the Inquisition's cruelty to know whose side she's on. The 3 decide to rest for the night, but Arthur never returns. Instead, the hideout is discovered. Inquisition soldiers break in, forcing Amicia, Hugo, and Melee to flee into the darkness once again. From the soldiers' shouted orders, they learn the grim truth. Arthur has been captured and taken to the Inquisition bastion, where he's being tortured for information. On their way through the countryside, the fugitives manage to rescue Lucas, who had been separated from them since the chaos at Laurentius's farm. Together, the group finally reaches the legendary refuge, Chateau d'Ombrage. To reclaim it from the plague's horrors, they drive the rats into a deep pit beneath the fortress, using brazier fires and makeshift traps. When the last of the vermin vanish into the abyss, the exhausted survivors collapse inside the ancient walls. For the first time in what feels like forever, Amicia, Hugo, Lucas, and Melee have a place to call home, a fragile sanctuary amid a dying world. The veins spreading across Hugo's body grow darker with each passing day. Lucas explains that the macula within his blood is evolving. According to ancient alchemical texts, the curse develops in stages, each separated by what is known as a threshold, a dangerous transformation point. During every threshold, the carrier's body and mind are pushed to their limits, and death is always a possibility. Neither Beatrice nor Laurentius ever discovered how to cure the macula. However, they did find a way to slow its progression, giving Hugo time to grow stronger and prepare to survive his first threshold. To do so, they needed a special elixir, one described in a forbidden tome known as the Sanguinis Itinera. The only known copy of the book lies within the university of a nearby city, not far from the Inquisition bastion, where Melee's brother, Arthur, is still imprisoned. Under normal circumstances, infiltrating the city would be impossible. But now, with the plague spreading and chaos consuming the streets, there's a chance to accomplish both tasks: steal the book and rescue Arthur. When Amicia enters the city, she finds it in ruins. The Inquisition has turned it into a nightmare of order and death. Soldiers drive the citizens beyond the walls, executing anyone who refuses to leave. In the plague-infested quarters, strange crystalline growths have appeared, formations of a substance called episangis, which the Inquisition collects and transports back to their bastion for unknown experiments. Even worse, the Inquisition has herded the sick into a confined district and slaughtered most of them. Those who survived the massacre were left to the rats. The result is a grotesque wasteland, an entire neighborhood transformed into a sea of corpses, bones, and blood. Amicia makes her way through the desolation to the university, but the halls are crawling with Inquisition soldiers, and their leader, the Grand Inquisitor Vitalis Benevent, is there in person. The old man is dying of the plague, the so-called bite, and to keep him alive, his alchemists drain the blood of the healthy by the liter to transfuse into his failing veins. Vitalis is also searching for the Sanguinis Itinera, believing it holds the secret he needs. But the book is sealed deep beneath the university, locked behind a massive door that only one man alive can open. The blacksmith's son who helped forge it. That man is Roderick, a strong-willed and fearless young smith. The Inquisition tortured and killed his father for refusing to cooperate, but Roderick too would rather die than serve the mad Grand Inquisitor. The soldiers escort him through the corridors, forcing him toward the sealed chamber, when Amicia strikes from the shadows, killing one of the guards. Roderick takes down the other himself, but the noise draws reinforcements, and to escape, Roderick has no choice but to open the door. Together, he and Amicia descend into the depths of the university. There, they finally discover the Sanguinis Itinera. Yet before they can leave, Vitalis and his men catch up to them. The Grand Inquisitor confronts Amicia, declaring that he has long watched over the de Rune bloodline, and that both the book and Hugo are essential to his divine plan to save the world. Flames erupt throughout the university as the Inquisition's forces close in. In the ensuing chaos, Amicia and Roderick manage to slip away, escaping through the burning ruins and vanishing into the night. Exhausted and shaken, they make their way back to Chateau d'Ombrage, clutching the forbidden tome that may hold the key to Hugo's fate. Lucas begins studying the Sanguinis Itinera and tries to brew the much-needed elixir, but the laboratory inside Chateau d'Ombrage is crude, lacking essential instruments and reagents, and Hugo's condition continues to worsen. The laboratory of Laurentius was destroyed, yet perhaps the one that belonged to Beatrice de Rune still survives in the ruins of their family estate. With no other choice, they decide to take the risk and return there. Before they can leave, Mélie arrives at the castle, having succeeded in freeing her brother Arthur from the Inquisition's clutches. She brings shocking news. Beatrice de Rune is alive. She's being held and tortured in the Inquisition's fortress, frail and broken, but still breathing. Amicia immediately orders everyone not to tell Hugo, fearing what the truth might do to him. But the boy overhears their conversation. The moment he learns his mother is alive, another seizure strikes him, far worse than any before. Time is running out. Amicia and Lucas set out for the de Rune estate, which now lies in ruins. The once grand manor has become a vast nest of rats. Yet amid the horror, one thing stands out. The rats ignore the corpses of the servants and even the body of Robert de Rune. Their behavior has changed drastically. They now move in coordinated formations, swirling in vortex-like clusters, as if driven by a single will. Stranger still, there is one untouched room in the entire estate, Hugo's chamber. Exploring deeper into the manor, into halls Amicia never saw in her childhood, they discover an ancient fresco depicting a plague that struck nearly 1,000 years ago. The Justinian plague that ravaged the Byzantine Empire during Emperor Justinian's reign. It seems the bite, the plague carried by cursed rats, once ravaged that world as well. At last, they find Beatrice's alchemical laboratory. It's nearly intact, and to Lucas's astonishment, she had been on the verge of completing the elixir without ever having access to the Sanguinis Itinera. Her brilliance leaves him awestruck. With the superior equipment at hand, he resolves to finish her work. But as he brews, the ground quakes and the rats pour into the chamber. Amicia fights to hold them back with alchemical fire, but her supplies run dry. Just when it seems they'll be overwhelmed, Lucas finishes the elixir, and miraculously, the rats retreat, squealing in terror as though sensing the power of the greenish liquid. Using this strange new weapon, Amicia and Lucas manage to escape the infested estate and return to Chateau d'Ombrage. There, Amicia gives Hugo the elixir. For a brief moment, his breathing steadies, his body relaxes, and then, Weakly, he asks her whether it's true that they will never see their mother again. Amicia looks him straight in the eyes, and lies. She tells him their mother is gone forever. When Amicia wakes, Hugo is gone. As soon as the elixir restored his strength, he slipped away into the night. Determined to find their mother, alone and unprotected, he's quickly captured by the Inquisition. The soldiers bring the boy before Grand Inquisitor Vitalis Benevent, whose decaying body is kept alive through transfusions of other people's blood. They begin drawing blood from Hugo, feeding it directly into the old man's veins. But the boy, still frail yet resourceful, manages to slip free from his captors and resumes his search for Beatrice. While sneaking through the fortress, Hugo witnesses a grim encounter. A papal archbishop arrives, bearing a decree from Rome. He declares that all of Vitalis's experiments are heresy, and that he is to be excommunicated for defying the Pope. Vitalis listens calmly, and dismisses the accusation without a flicker of remorse. Following Lord Nicholas through the bastion's shadowed halls, Hugo discovers what the Inquisition has been doing in secret. Their alchemists are breeding a new kind of rat, hairless, pale, and unnaturally obedient. These creatures are fed with the blood of living victims, drained alive in the dungeons below. At last, Hugo finds his mother, wounded, broken, but alive. When she sees her son, Beatrice forgets her pain. Hugo confides that he keeps hearing a voice in his head, calm, commanding, calling him to unite. Beatrice, instead of recoiling, gently tells him not to be afraid, to listen, to answer the voice. Her touch and her soothing words calm the boy. He focuses on the whisper within his mind, and suddenly, the rats begin to obey him. At first, the control is weak and unstable. A few rats move uncertainly at his will, but the power grows. Within moments, the entire swarm bends to his command. Mother and son escape the dungeon, but on the upper floors they are intercepted by Vitalis, Lord Nicholas, and their soldiers. Nicholas orders his men to execute Beatrice, while Vitalis unleashes waves of rats to test the boy's power. But this confrontation is no mere execution, it's a calculated provocation. Vitalis's goal is to force Hugo into crossing his second threshold. Since part of Hugo's blood has already been transfused into Vitalis, the macula now flows in the Grand Inquisitor's veins as well. Yet Vitalis cannot complete the transformation on his own. He needs Hugo to cross first, to open the way for him. Driven by fury and fear, Hugo commands his rats to attack, sending endless black tides against the Inquisitors. The halls of the bastion drown in gnashing teeth and screams, but as his strength drains, his control falters. The macula surges within him, threatening to consume him. Yet, to Vitalis's frustration, the boy does not cross the threshold. When his power fades, the Inquisition subdues him once more. Hugo and Beatrice are taken captive again, while the Grand Inquisitor broods over his failure. He reaches a chilling conclusion. To force the child beyond the threshold, Hugo must witness the death of his sister. Amicia sets out to find her brother, wandering alone through the forests for days. Exhausted, starving, and half delirious, she nearly dies, until she's discovered and rescued by her friends from Chateau d'Ombrage. 3 weeks pass. The castle becomes a fragile refuge once more, but peace doesn't last. One night, an enormous swarm of rats descends upon the fortress, more organized, more relentless than ever before. They move like soldiers, advancing in formation, striking with terrifying coordination, as though someone is commanding them. The answer soon reveals itself. Lord Nicholas arrives at the castle gates, and he's not alone. Beside him stands Hugo, dressed in the robes of the Inquisition, his eyes distant and unfocused, his face blank as stone. Nicholas orders the boy to kill his sister. If he refuses, Beatrice will be executed before his very eyes. For a moment, Amicia is paralyzed, unable to believe that her brother could be standing there, weapon in hand, obeying the man who destroyed their family. But before Hugo can strike, Arthur intervenes. From above, he collapses a pile of stones onto Nicholas, crushing him beneath the rubble and giving Amicia a chance to reach Hugo. The boy remains dazed, trapped in a trance, his mind clouded by the Inquisition's manipulation. Amicia speaks to him, softly at first, then pleading, desperate, reminding him of their family, their mother, their home. Slowly, recognition returns to his eyes. The fog lifts. Hugo remembers who he is. But their moment of relief is brief. Nicholas claws his way out from under the rubble, bloodied but alive. Before Arthur can finish him off, the Inquisitor drives his blade through the young man's chest, killing him instantly. Enraged, Hugo turns his power loose. With a single command, he summons the rats. The ground splits open, and a living tide bursts forth, engulfing Lord Nicholas. His screams echo through the halls before he's dragged beneath the surface and devoured. When the horror finally subsides, the survivors gather in silence. The truth is clear. The Inquisition will never stop hunting them. Amicia and Hugo vow to rescue their mother from Vitalis Benevent, while Melis swears vengeance for her brother's death, and Roderick seeks justice for his murdered father. And now, they have a weapon the Inquisition never expected: Hugo's command over the rats. It's time to strike back. Time to bring down the Grand Inquisitor once and for all. They infiltrate the city, now completely under the control of the Inquisition, and fight their way through barricades and burning streets. Soldiers swarm the alleys, the sound of steel and screams echoing through the ruins. During the chaos, Roderick makes the ultimate sacrifice, holding off the Inquisition's troops so that Amicia and Hugo can escape. His last stand buys them the precious seconds they need to reach the cathedral. The Grand Cathedral, once a place of worship, has been transformed into a grotesque nest, a living monument to corruption. Its walls pulse with infestation, the floors covered with writhing masses of rats. At its heart sits the deranged Grand Inquisitor Vitalis Benevent, his body frail and bloated, veins black with the Prima Macula that now flows in his blood. As Amicia and Hugo approach, Vitalis unleashes his creation, a new breed of white rats, bred by the Inquisition's alchemists to obey only him. What follows is a battle unlike anything the world has seen, a war of rats beneath the cathedral's towering arches. Hugo commands his own army, the Black Swarms, driving them forward with sheer will, clashing against the pale tide of Vitalis's beasts. The cathedral shakes as the two forces collide, the air filled with shrieks and the crackle of flame. Amid the chaos, Amicia fights her way to the old madman. With a single, perfect shot from her sling, she strikes Vitalis in the head, ending his reign of madness. With the Grand Inquisitor dead, Hugo, now the true master of the Prima Macula, calls off the swarm. The rats retreat, vanishing into the shadows beneath the ruined city. The plague ends as suddenly as it began. 3 days later, the de Rune family, Amicia, Hugo, Beatrice, and Lucas, make their way to the nearest port. They board a small ship and set sail toward the open sea, leaving the lands of death and plague behind. Their destination is unknown, but for the first time in a long while, there is hope on the horizon. Half a year passes. Amicia, Hugo, Lucas, and Beatrice have fled from Guyenne and now wander across the country. There's been no sign of the bite or the rats, and all traces of the macula seem to have vanished. Hugo has no more seizures, and the dark veins on his skin have faded back to a healthy color. Amicia spends her days running through the forests of Provence with the children, laughing and playing as though the horrors of the past have finally lifted. While following the riverbank, they stumble upon the ruins of a vast castle. During their play, Hugo decides he will conquer it. Inside, they find rooms that still appear inhabited, and beyond the walls, smoke rises from charred beehives. Soon it becomes clear that not long before their arrival, the castle's beekeepers were attacked by thieves who burned the hives. But the beekeepers fought back savagely, hunting down the raiders and cutting most of them to pieces with axes. Mistaking Amicia and Hugo for stragglers from that gang, the beekeepers charge at them, and the siblings are forced to flee for their lives. The beekeepers eventually catch up to them. Just as Amicia's life is about to end, the macula within Hugo stirs once more. From beneath the earth, a flood of rats bursts forth, devouring the attackers alive. The boy collapses unconscious. He dreams of a radiant island with 2 sharp peaks. On its shore, a phoenix greets him and leads him toward a small pond. As they walk, pain surges through Hugo's body. He feels the macula tightening its grip on him. Still, he pushes forward, following the bird until he steps into the pond, whose shimmering waters cleanse and soothe him. Then he awakens, lying in a wagon beside his mother, sister, and Lucas. They behave as though nothing had happened, as if there had been no beekeepers, no castle, no blood. Amicia tells him they were only playing by the river, and that he fainted. Lucas assumes it's from malnutrition or exhaustion. Beatrice drives the cart toward a distant city where Magister Vaudin, a scholar of the Order of Alchemists, resides. The Order has studied the macula for centuries, and Beatrice believes Vaudin can help her son. The city, under the protection of the Count of Provence, seems untouched by war or plague. There is peace, order, and law. No Inquisition, no soldiers, and no rats. The travelers settle into a small, cozy house, finally able to rest on soft beds. That night, Hugo tells his sister about his dream, about the island, the Twin Peaks, the Phoenix, and the healing waters. But as soon as they begin to relax, the peace shatters. Hugo starts screaming in his sleep. His veins darken once again. The macula never left. It only slumbered, and after what happened at the castle, it has awakened once more. Without hesitation, Amicia and Lucas set out to find Magister Vaudin. When they reach the city gates, they discover that part of the city has been sealed off. The arena, through which the only path to the Order's tower lies, has been locked down by the Count's guards for unknown reasons. Sneaking into the restricted zone, Amicia and Lucas soon learn the truth. The bite has returned. The rat plague has reached Provence. Lucas quickly connects the dots. The bite follows the rats, and the rats follow Hugo. They have brought the plague here. The sick have been herded into the arena district. The narrow streets are piled with corpses. The rats themselves are nowhere to be seen. Yet, mercenaries disguised as the Count's soldiers prowl the plague-ridden streets, searching for Magister Vaudin, though their motives remain unclear. Beyond the arena, the two realize the scale of the disaster. The infection is not contained. Much of the city is sealed off, silent, and dead. To reach Vaudin's tower, they must cross this forsaken place. At first, they move across the rooftops, but the plan quickly falls apart. The old tiles crumble under their weight. Amicia and Lucas plunge through the ceiling into the depths below, and come face to face with their worst fear. The rats have returned. Millions of them, far more than in Guyenne, fill the tunnels and streets, a writhing sea of claws and teeth. But as before, they fear the light. Using fire and quick thinking, Amicia and Lucas fight their way through the swarm, and finally emerge onto the surface, not far from the alchemist's tower. Inside the tower, Magister Vaudin awaits them. Amicia tries to introduce herself, but the alchemist already knows who she is. He says that the Order has been watching her for some time, deeply impressed by how she destroyed the Inquisition in Guyenne. That, he explains, was no coincidence and no mere luck. A higher force chose her. She was called to serve as the protector of the carrier. That is her role within the Order. Before leaving the tower with the alchemist, Amicia notices a painting on the wall, an image of an island with two sharp peaks, exactly like the one her brother described in his dream. Vaudin locks himself in a chamber with Beatrice and Hugo. The boy's body reacts violently to the alchemist's potions, and according to Vaudin, Hugo is approaching the third threshold. When that happens, he warns, the consequences will be catastrophic, far greater than anything the world has seen before. To prevent disaster, Hugo must be isolated. The Order, Vaudin claims, has special facilities built for such cases. He insists that the closer Hugo comes to death, the more dangerous he becomes, that his demise is inevitable, and that as it draws nearer, it will bring more death and destruction in its wake. For that reason, Vaudin demands that the boy be confined within the Order's fortress in Marseille. Beatrice, broken and exhausted, resigns herself to her son's fate, but Amicia refuses. She confronts Vaudin, demanding to know the meaning of the island she saw in his laboratory, and why it looks exactly like the place from Hugo's dreams. The Magister offers no explanation. Beatrice's desperate pleas finally calm her daughter. For now, a ship is already waiting for them in the harbor. Vaudin has arranged passage with a man named Joseph, who is to take them to Marseille. Hugo's condition rapidly worsens. The number of rats grows by the hour, and the plague spreads again. The Count of Provence, realizing the danger, orders the city to be sealed under quarantine. Amicia and Lucas set out to meet Joseph, and just as they reach the harbor, an enormous wave of rats bursts through the city walls, flooding the port district. They manage to find Joseph, who is being detained by a soldier enforcing the Count's lockdown order. But Joseph isn't the kind of man who follows rules blindly. He knocks the guard out cold and prepares to flee. Before he can sail away, Amicia and Lucas call out to him. Hearing Vaudin's name, he reluctantly agrees to honor the contract and smuggle them out of the city. Lucas stays behind at the docks to wait for the others, while Amicia races back home. But the city begins to shake violently. From every street, from beneath every stone, Rats erupt in unimaginable numbers, vast heaving masses that devour everything in their path. Stone walls crumble, houses collapse, and entire districts vanish under the living tide. Amicia miraculously survives the onslaught and reaches home, only to find Hugo in the middle of a seizure. The house groans under the pressure of the swarm. Walls crack, the roof collapses, and Vaudin is dragged screaming into the seething darkness below. Beatrice and Amicia manage to calm Hugo just before the rats engulf them. The boy awakens, and with a single breath, the swarm stops. The rats retreat. Through the ruined city, the three survivors make their way to the port, where Joseph and Lucas are waiting. They sail down what was once a river, now turned into a pestilent current choked with corpses. Hugo refuses to be imprisoned in the Order's fortress. He insists that he must go to the island from his dreams, the place with two peaks, where he believes he can be cured. For Amicia and Hugo, it's clear that Vaudin's actions caused the disaster that destroyed the city, and that the Order's obsession will only bring more ruin. But Beatrice still believes that her son's isolation is the only way to save what's left of the world. Along the way, their boat is ambushed by mercenaries, the same group Amicia had encountered earlier in the quarantine zone near the arena. They're led by a grizzled knight named Arnaud. During the attack, Joseph is killed, and grappling hooks seize the boat, forcing Amicia to fight once again for the lives of her family and Lucas. She struggles to free the vessel, but the ropes hold fast. Arnaud himself boards the boat and strikes Amicia in the head with the pommel of his sword, knocking her to the deck. Seeing his sister in danger yet again, Hugo calls upon the Macula, and the ground trembles. A swarm of rats bursts from below, forcing the knight back and gnawing through the ropes that bind the boat. The vessel breaks free, but Hugo refuses to sail for Marseille. Amicia finds herself at a crossroads. Should she obey her mother and surrender Hugo to the Order's isolation, or follow her brother's vision, his dream of the island with two peaks? After everything they've endured together, she chooses without hesitation. She stands by her brother. Their paths diverge from Beatrice and Lucas as Amicia and Hugo set out to find the island from his dreams. Soldiers pursue them, driving the siblings into a deep quarry. There, Hugo begins to experiment with his power, learning to control the rats directly, clearing paths and defending Amicia. But the wound she suffered from Arnaud's strike begins to take its toll. As her strength fades, Hugo overextends himself, summoning too many rats at once. The effort overwhelms him, his concentration falters, and the swarm slips from his control. The rats turn wild, devouring everything in their path. Mustering the last of her strength, Amicia drags her brother out of the collapsing quarry, but she's too weak to escape herself. Then, unexpectedly, help arrives. Their rescuer is Arnaud, the very knight who nearly killed her. The seasoned warrior tends to Amicia's wounds, and within 2 days she's back on her feet. Arnaud explains his motives. The Count of Provence has declared him an outlaw, hunted down his mercenaries, and slaughtered most of them. He knows it's only a matter of time before he's caught and executed. His only chance at survival, he says, is to side with those who control the rat plague. More than that, Arnaud claims he knows the island from Hugo's dream. It's called La Cuna, the cradle, and he promises to help them reach it through a contact of his, a ship captain who owes him a favor. Together, the three of them journey through a labyrinth of rat-infested caves until they reach the hidden cove of Sophia, a daring smuggler and sea captain. Despite her reluctance, and because she owes Arnaud a debt, Sophia agrees to take them aboard. The ship sets sail toward La Cuna. As the morning mist lifts, 2 sharp mountain peaks emerge on the horizon, rising from the sea like fangs. They are exactly as Hugo saw them in his dreams, exactly like the image Amicia once glimpsed on Vaudin's wall. The island is real. The ship docks at the harbor, and the group disembarks. La Cuna turns out to be a paradise, a land of gentle climate, kind people, and breathtaking landscapes. They arrive at a time of celebration. The islanders are holding a grand festival, their most sacred event of the year. The town square is alive with music and color, and on the central platform stands the speaker of the festivities, the Count of Provence himself, the very man whose soldiers slaughtered nearly all of Arnaud's men. Enraged, Arnaud seizes Hugo and orders him to unleash the rats upon the Count. Only now does Amicia realize the truth. While she was unconscious, Arnaud manipulated Hugo into believing this act would bring justice. That's why he helped them. not out of friendship, but for revenge. Amicia refuses to let anyone use her brother as a weapon again. She stops Hugo and confronts Arnaud. The knight charges at the Count alone. Amicia, unable to stand by while her brother is exploited, aids the Count in battle. Arnaud is defeated, captured, and thrown into the dungeons. The Count and Countess of Provence welcome Amicia and Hugo as honored guests in their magnificent palace. During their stay, the Countess Emily Dahl tells them of the island's faith, the worship of a childlike pagan deity known as the Child of Embers. The people believe that this sleeping child protects them from rats, plague, and famine, granting them peace and prosperity. As they explore the castle, Amicia and Hugo notice a mural depicting a great phoenix, the same bird from Hugo's dream, rising in fire and light. At last, Amicia and Hugo are able to rest properly. The next morning, joined by Sophia, they set out to explore the island, hoping to find the pond from Hugo's dreams, the one with the healing waters. As they travel through Lacuna, they come across an ancient mosaic map depicting various locations arranged in the shape of the Order of Alchemists' crest. It becomes clear that the Order once established a presence here centuries ago. The three decide to investigate the sites marked on the map. The first location is a sanctuary, where the islanders, led by the Count and Countess, conduct elaborate rituals in honor of the Child of Embers. Inside, a fresco depicts a mother and child, strikingly similar to the image Amicia and Lucas once saw in Beatrice's laboratory back in Guyenne. It's proof that the Order used this sanctuary long ago. Exploring the catacombs beneath the building, they discover the living quarters of two figures, Basileus and Aelia. Basileus was a carrier of the macula during the 6th century, at the time of the Justinian plague, and Aelia was his protector. The chamber contains a stagnant pond, eerily similar to the one in Hugo's vision, but its water offers him no relief, no healing. From the Order's ancient records, they learn the rest of the story. The Order forcibly separated the carrier and his protector. Aelia rebelled against them and was imprisoned in a chapel inside a fortress elsewhere on the island. That fortress is now occupied by slavers, fanatics who sacrifice captives in the name of the Child of Embers. They believe the sleeping child demands blood, and that when it awakens, those who offer sacrifices will stand beside it in glory. Amicia, Hugo, and Sophia watch in horror as the slavers slit the throats of chained prisoners, chanting prayers to their false god. The sight sends Hugo into a rage. The macula flares within him, and the earth splits as rats surge upward, devouring many of the slavers. Amid the chaos, Amicia locates the chapel, where Aelia had been imprisoned. Inside, she finds another clue, a symbol pointing to where Basileus himself was buried, deep beneath the mosaic map they had found earlier. But before they can escape, the remaining slavers attack. Amicia fights bravely, but they are outnumbered. Overwhelmed by fear and anger, Hugo loses control. He unleashes the full force of his power, summoning a horde of rats and commanding them to kill everyone in sight. The slaughter is total. It takes all of Amicia's strength to pull Hugo away from the carnage. When the fury fades, the boy collapses, sobbing. They found the island, the pond, the truth about the Order, yet nothing has brought him peace or a cure. Still, Amicia and Sophia refuse to let him despair. They convince him to press on. Perhaps the tomb of the previous carrier, Basileus, still holds an answer. That night, the paradise of Lacuna descends into hell. Rats pour from the ground in numbers beyond counting, overrunning the island and devouring everything in their path. The three make their way back to the mosaic and break through the stonework, opening a passage into a vast, ancient underground complex, a subterranean city crawling with rats. Pushing through the first wave of vermin, they enter a great hall filled with corpses, the remnants of a battle. But this was no fight between humans and rats. It was a massacre. A small army lies dead, slain by a single warrior. At the center of the carnage lies Aelia, the protector of the previous carrier. She died trying to reach Basileus's cell, cutting down many of the Order's soldiers before she fell. Deeper in the catacombs, beyond a monstrous rat nest, Amicia, Hugo, and Sophia finally find Basileus, his body shackled in iron chains, surrounded by enormous pulsating cocoons teeming with rodents. The Order hadn't known what to do with the carrier. In their fear, they imprisoned him here, deep beneath the island. But isolation didn't save them. Separated from Aelia, deprived of the only person he loved, Basileus was left to rot in the dark, In his despair, he surrendered completely to the Prima Macula. The plague that followed, the Justinian plague, nearly wiped out Byzantium itself. Basilius died chained in darkness, consumed by the very curse he carried. There are no elixirs here, no scrolls, no ancient cure, only death and silence. Yet Amicia finds one grim comfort. She was right not to hand Hugo over to the alchemists in Marseille. Otherwise, his fate would have mirrored Basileus's. The rat cocoons burst open, filling the chamber with a roaring swarm. There's nothing left to do but flee. As they run, Amicia tells her brother that Basileus's torment came from being separated from Aelia, his protector, the one person who never abandoned him. She takes Hugo's hand and swears that she will never leave him, no matter what comes. The island is almost completely overrun by rats, and the three survivors, Amicia, Hugo, and Sophia, decide that there's nothing left for them here. They head toward the port, ready to leave Lacuna behind. Suddenly, a soldier of the Count's army calls out to them. He says he has strict orders to escort Amicia and Hugo back to the castle. Their mother, Beatrice, and Lucas have arrived and are waiting for them. Sophia hurries ahead to prepare the ship for departure, while Amicia and Hugo follow the soldier. The castle, once radiant and serene, has become the island's last fortress. The people, armed with torches and pipes of burning Greek fire, stand behind lines of braziers, fending off endless waves of rats that hurl themselves at the walls like a living tide. Inside, Amicia and Hugo reunite with Beatrice and Lucas. Amicia tells her mother everything they've learned about Basilius, Aelia, and the Order's lies. Beatrice listens in silence, then admits her daughter was right not to give Hugo to the alchemists. Together they agree to leave the island behind and find peace somewhere far away, perhaps in the quiet valleys of the French Alps. But before they can depart, a knight arrives with a message. The Count wishes to speak with Amicia. The meeting is a trap. The Count attacks her, shoving her down a flight of stairs. She crashes hard, dislocating her shoulder. Looming over her, he reveals his true motive. His wife, Countess Emily, believes that Hugo is the divine child of Embers, and she must have him, at any cost. The Count knows Amicia will never hand over her brother, so she must die. Amicia tries desperately to reason with him, telling him that the island's faith is a lie, that the child of Embers is not divine at all, but Basilius, the ancient carrier of the macula, and that their sacred murals were misinterpreted long ago. But the Count only smirks. He knows. He's the one who invented the entire religion. He confesses that he did it all for Emily. She had fallen into despair and tried to end her life. The story of the sleeping child gave her hope, a reason to live. But the lie grew beyond his control, spreading like wildfire through the island, birthing a cult that worships a false savior. Amicia escapes the Count's grasp and flees through the corridors, eventually stumbling into the amphitheater. There, she finds Emily preparing a horrific ritual. Beatrice is bound at the center of the stage, about to be sacrificed. The deranged countess believes that by killing Hugo's mother, she will make the boy truly hers, that he will shine with holy light and heal the world. Amicia, battered and in agony, rushes forward to stop her, but the Count intercepts her, toying with the wounded girl like a cat with its prey. She collapses, helpless, forced to watch as Emily cuts Beatrice's throat. Far away, in the Count's chambers, Hugo awakens with a scream. He feels the pain and terror through the bond of the macula. Staggering to the amphitheater, he finds his mother's lifeless body tied to the pillar, her blood soaking the stones. Rage, sorrow, despair, the emotions consume him utterly. The macula takes full hold. The earth trembles and rats explode from the ground like a black tide. For the first time, Amicia does not try to stop him. Standing beside her brother, eyes burning, she whispers, "More rats. We need more rats." The swarm engulfs the arena. Soldiers are torn apart. The rats climb the stage, devouring Emily before the Count's eyes. Screaming, he's dragged away by his remaining men as the ground gives way. Hugo collapses, and the floor of the amphitheater caves in beneath them. When silence finally falls, Hugo opens his eyes. But something in him is gone. His face is blank, his gaze hollow. He no longer reacts to Amicia's voice or Lucas's touch. Lucas examines him and concludes that his consciousness has been overtaken, that only the macula remains in control. Whether it's temporary or permanent, he cannot tell. Amicia is crushed. All hope drains from her. She realizes that peace will never find them. Wherever they go, death and rats will follow. She's ready to give up, to let it all end. But Lucas refuses to let her surrender. "If I must," he says, "I'll carry both of you, but I'll get you off this cursed island." His determination rekindles a spark in her. Drawing on the last of her strength, Amicia rises once more, lifting her brother in her arms. For Hugo's sake, she keeps moving forward, one step at a time, through the ruins of Lacuna, toward whatever future still awaits them. Wandering through the catacombs beneath the castle and the island's caves, Amicia, Hugo, and Lucas stumble into a vast underground chamber, filled with colossal rat nests and pulsating cocoons. The air vibrates with a low hum, and the walls seem alive. In a detached, eerie voice, Hugo murmurs that this is his home, and that she will kill the sun. Lucas, flipping through the fragments of alchemical notes he's gathered, realizes what they've found. He's read of such a formation before, a structure called the Nebula, the killer of the sun, the devourer of light. The one before them is still in its infancy, but its presence is unmistakable. Then, the Macula, speaking through Hugo, declares, "We are home." Lucas understands. If the carrier remains within the nebula, it will grow, spreading outward until it blots out the sun entirely, allowing the macula to consume the entire world. But Amicia refuses to give her brother up. The macula, aware and sentient, lashes out in fury. Waves of rats surge from every crevice, attacking them with animalistic precision. Once again, they run for their lives, escaping the monstrous hive by sheer luck and willpower. When they finally break free of the nebula's domain, Hugo begins to stir, his voice returning, his eyes clearing. For a moment, it seems as though her brother is still in there, fighting to come back. Despite the chaos consuming the island, they learn that Arno is still alive, though the Count intends to have him executed. Cold and distant, Hugo insists that they save the night. Amicia can't refuse him, not now. Together they storm the gallows and cut Arno down from the noose, escaping amidst the confusion. They board Sophia's ship and set sail once more, away from plague, from rats, from war. For the first time it feels as though there might still be a chance for life beyond all this death. But, as the battle-worn knight once said, the problem with war is that it doesn't end just because you want it to. Behind them, a ship appears, its sails bearing the Count of Provence's crest. The Count's men board Sophia's vessel, and a brutal fight erupts. Sophia and Lucas are thrown overboard. Amicia and Arnaud stand back to back, fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. A crossbow bolt pierces Amicia's side. Arnaud raises his tower shield, blocking another strike and shielding her body with his own. The Count himself descends onto the deck, flanked by armored guards. Hugo, terrified, tries to summon the rats, but at sea his power is gone. The Count seizes him, declaring that the boy will help him reshape the world, through destruction and rebirth. He orders his men to kill the survivors. Wounded and dying, Arnaud makes one final choice. He throws Amicia overboard, saving her life once more, and dives in after her. The sea spits them out on a shattered coastline near Marseille, along with the wreckage of what's left of their ship. Arnaud tends to Amicia's wound for the second time and helps her to her feet. Together they set out to find Sophia and Lucas, but the Count is already waiting for them on the beach. He reveals his plan. Hugo has been sent to Marseille, one of the largest cities in France, where his awakening will finish what the macula began. Arnaud charges the Count while Amicia fends off his soldiers. In the city, Hugo, consumed by grief, believes that Amicia is dead. Broken and hopeless, he surrenders completely to the macula. The third threshold is crossed. A tangible wave of primordial corruption bursts outward, enveloping Marseille and the surrounding lands. The nebula begins to form, vast, alive, spreading across the sky, devouring the light. On the beach, the Count disarms Arnaud and drives his blade through the knight's chest. Mortally wounded, Arnaud tears the helmet from the Count's head, exposing his face. It's the opening Amicia needs. With one last burst of strength, she hurls a stone from her sling. It strikes the Count squarely in the skull, killing him instantly. Later, Amicia, Lucas, and Sophia hitch a wagon and ride through the ashen haze that has blotted out the sun. As they approach Marseille, the ground trembles. From within the city walls come rhythmic thuds, slow, deliberate, like the beating of a giant heart. The sound matches Hugo's pulse. Each beat shakes the walls, the earth, the air. Lucas calls it the last song of the Macula. The people flee in terror, while the soldiers erect barricades around the city, sealing it off completely. Everyone inside is presumed dead. But no barricade, no stone wall, no fortress can withstand the fury of millions of rats moving in perfect rhythm. They burst through the gates in a living wave, spreading in every direction. Through the chaos, Amicia, Lucas, and Sophia find a narrow breach in the defenses and slip into the dying city of Marseille. In the center of what was once the thriving city of Marseille, a massive, pulsating sphere now looms, a living embodiment of the Macula. Somewhere inside, Hugo has fused completely with the curse, forming the ever-growing nebula, which has already blotted out the sun across a vast region. If left unchecked, it will soon engulf the entire world. From the nebula's core, endless rivers of rats surge outward, devouring everything in their path. One of these waves crashes into Amicia, Lucas, and Sophia, hurling them to the ground. Sophia's leg is broken. She can go no further. With a silent nod, Amicia and Lucas press on alone, determined to reach the heart of the darkness. They move through the rhythmic tides of rats, each movement echoing with the heartbeat of the dying world. The closer they get to the nebula, the less the laws of nature seem to matter. Gravity falters, light bends, sound dissolves. The very air vibrates with the will of the Macula. As they cross into the sphere's core, Amicia's consciousness begins to fade. A dense fog fills her mind, and within it, she hears a familiar voice. It's Hugo. Though his body and spirit are bound to the Macula, a fragment of his true self still remains, lucid, sorrowful, and aware. He tells his sister the truth she already feels in her heart. The point of no return has been crossed. It's no longer possible to save both him and the world. One must perish for the other to survive. With what remains of his strength, Hugo shields Amicia and Lucas from the writhing swarm, granting them safe passage to the very center. The place where boy and plague have become one. There, beneath a dying sky and the endless roar of rats, Amicia de Rune makes the hardest choice of her life. She lifts her sling, whispering her brother's name, and releases a single, perfect shot, ending his suffering and saving the world from the Macula. A year passes. Amicia now lives in the mountains, far from the cities and their noise. She's buried Hugo atop a high, wind-swept peak, where the sun still shines untainted. Each day she climbs to his grave to speak to him, promising that his sacrifice will never be forgotten. She has devoted her life to studying what remains of the Prima Macula, determined to prepare for the day when it inevitably stirs again. For the Macula never truly dies. It only sleeps, waiting for its next vessel. Centuries pass. Somewhere, in a quiet hospital room, a newborn takes its first breath. A faint pulse of ancient power ripples beneath its fragile skin. The Prima Macula has awakened once more. Thank you for watching till the end. Just a quick reminder, my channel is barely over a month old, and every like and subscription means the world and helps it grow. I'll be waiting for you in Save Room archives. See you there, and may all the creepy stuff pass you by.